What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Cynthia Pelayo. We're talking about her book, Vanishing Daughters, that is available on March 11th. This is a second podcast interview I've had with Cynthia, and I've met her in person at Midwest Mystery Conference back in November. Fellow Chicago native, and I just always enjoy catching up with her. With Vanishing Daughters, with this conversation, I just really appreciated her authenticity and how just honest she was in how writing and developing Vanishing Daughters helped her navigate her own experience with loss of a loved one. But either way, I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Cynthia. So today we've got Cynthia Pelayo. We're talking about her book, Vanishing Daughters. That book is available on March 11th. Cynthia, thank you for joining me. Welcome back, I guess. It's nice to see and talk to you again, seeing you in person, and we've chatted before from one of your other works. And so I really enjoyed this one. So many heartfelt moments in Vanishing Daughters, and I felt for Briar, even though it was girl, what wait, what? Because there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we saw each other recently too at the Midwest Mystery Con.
Yeah, that was fun. I really enjoyed that. I enjoy just like not only seeing authors like I really enjoy in like previous guests, but then I liked the sense of community that you guys have because it's just helpful and you're just trying to be helpful for each other and then also giving readers a chance to dig a little bit deeper into anything that they might not even know about or that they can keep up to date on like what you guys have going on next. It was so cool. That's the first time I've ever been to that one.
Oh yeah, it's really great. It's a great venue. It's at Roosevelt University. It's just a great space.
Yeah. Yeah, it worked out really well for sure. Although funny thing is I gave myself so much time to get there, but then I don't know what it was where it was like my confirmation email, the address was said like South Roosevelt, I think it was, or South Michigan Avenue when the address was no, it was said North Michigan Avenue. This address was South Michigan Avenue. Luckily, it was only like a mile difference, so it didn't take me that long to walk. But I was like so confused because I was at this place that I think it was like a property management company, and the security guy's like, "Can I help you?" And I'm like, "This doesn't look right." I'm like, so I was like digging through all the information that I could find, and I was like, okay. I was like even interviewing people at K. Hey, I don't know if you're gonna get this in time. Like I'm trying to figure it out. And they're like, no, you're just you gotta go south, you're at north. And so luckily I wasn't like too late, but I was just like, okay, like I've just got my steps in for the day. I don't know
Yeah,
why.
there you go. And thank goodness it wasn't like cold or rainy that day.
Oh no, it was really good for what was it, a November day? Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't bad at all. But yeah, that was super fun. I enjoy going to book events like that. So before we get started, can you share like a summary of Vanishing Daughters so that because it hasn't come out yet, we'll try to be spoiler free for this interview, but just so that people can follow along with the conversation?
Sure. So Vanishing Daughters follows Briar Rose Thorne, who lives in a crumbling mansion on Chicago's South Side. Her mother recently died, and it's like their ancestral home. They're like third, fourth generation Chicagoans, and their wealth came from the radio, the actual radio devices business. So that's why they had this gorgeous home. But over time, the business, of course, like waned down with new technology. So the mansion's crumbling. Briar's mother died, and Briar is struggling intensely with grief, and she's suffering visual and audio hallucinations. She's also a freelance journalist, so money is difficult for her. And so she has the stress of trying to upkeep this home, the stress of her mother's death. And she's also even though she's a health journalist, she started researching the recent murders of 51 women in the south side of Chicago. And her research becomes so close that she gets a little too close to the serial killer, and they take interest in her.
Mhm. Yeah, there was like a lot, and it did because you said that like the eerie tone, like creepy, like all right, like you set the mood for sure. So like within the first few pages we get, and I really when I read what was it, Forgotten Sisters, it reminded me a lot of that. I was like, yep, there we go. We're into Cynthia's like environment, we're in her vibe. I really enjoyed it. Just when you I feel like it's some books, it depends on if you're in the mood for it, but if the author can easily ease you into that mood where you know what to expect, because then you could take it with the appropriate you could take it with the seriousness that you need to, versus, I don't know, like a lighthearted, like a fluffy book, for example. And what I appreciated also was that you will g there's a lot to unpack here. I'm gonna get all over the place, but also just with the Chicago, like, you threw in a lot of Chicago history and, like, Chicago like, I wanna tap into that because 'cause you've also done that you do that with a lot of your books, I'm guessing, right?
Yes, for I'm working on one right now that actually doesn't take place in Chicago, so that's an
Okay.
interesting experience because everything I've written, except for like maybe one or two things, it takes place in Chicago, and Chicago is a character. And
Mm,
especially with Vanishing Daughters and the book that came out last year, Forgotten Sisters, Chicago is very prominently displayed, the history and the local folklore.
mhm. Yeah, I think that also helps to definitely set the tone as well. Because then once you, like, progress through the story, because Briar, I really liked her, but, she's like an unreliable narrator because she's grieving right from page 1, she's confused, like, she doesn't remember something, and then when she slowly begins to remember, and then as the reader progresses through the story, we're putting the pieces together with her, so that once it got into that momentum, then I was like I understood, I was like, "Okay, I'm supposed to be confused because she's confused." So she's a mess, she's grieving, and she's trying so hard, and she doesn't know what to do.
Yes, and that was like I was grieving at that time because my father died, and
Mm,
I was struggling with a lot of these things that Briar is experiencing to the point that I was so scared that I went to my doctor and I was like, "What is happening?" And he was like, "This is grief, Cynthia, and you just have to go through it. You're going to be okay, but this is very much what you're experiencing, especially when you lose someone that you love, like you love someone that if anyone has lost anyone like that, that they're just like, this person is a major person in their life. It is devastating because not only are you grieving the person, but you are grieving the person that you were with them. And so all your inside jokes, your relationship, and it was just so difficult. And I wanted to show that through Briar, how much she loved her mother and how close they were, and that sleep disturbances when you're grieving are very real. Sometimes people don't want, and it varies. Sometimes people want to just eat. And when they can eat, sometimes people can't eat. And Briar could not eat. She couldn't take care of herself. She couldn't even get herself to the shower. She's just sitting by the window, moping in her bathrobe for days and doesn't even know what day it is. And
mm.
days just start seeping in together. She starts hearing things, seeing things, and I take the reader through that experience as well, where it's like, what is happening to her?
Yeah, and that definitely, like I definitely was in there, I was in it where it was easy to get immersed in her experience that way because, like, you definitely I imagine I'm sorry to hear about your dad, but I when I'm reading the, like, also the acknowledgments too, you alluded to that where you were like, this was I don't wanna say a love letter to grief, but it was, like, therapeutic for you. It was you trying to at least the gist that I got was you just really exploring and putting that down, like, finding some outlet for to cope with it, because it's you're right, like, so many put like, powerful lines and positions that Briar takes, like, during her inner monologues and stuff like that. It was just I remember a couple of them I highlighted because I was like, God, that's, like, such a new and at least for me, it was, like, a new way to look at it, to articulate it, like,
Mm,
especially what you just said, like, you missed who you were with that person. There's no more gonna be no more experiences with that person or no more experiences where you can return no other opportunities where you can return to that part of yourself naturally, the person that you were with them, the now that they're no longer around, and I just thought that was so, like it was such, like, a powerful way to put it, and it puts it into perspective, like, obviously lost, like, you're losing a huge impact, a huge presence in your life, but then how that, like, that dotted line, that attachment to that person, it's not just the attachment, it's how they shaped who you are, and then how
ex-
you go forward.
exactly. And there were just so many just strange things about grief physically that I didn't even know. I was just so confused. And one of the things I remember waking up just screaming, and I had never experienced night terrors before, but I would wake up out of breath. I would wake up screaming. I would wake up thinking I saw something. I would wake up and I would have like audio hallucinations, like thinking I heard my father in the room. And it was just terrifying. And I then started really thinking about what is it that I believe happens to us when we die. And that's something that
Mhm.
I I had struggled a lot. I had gone through a lot of health issues in the past and I had struggled with that. And I think this losing my dad really made me reassess my belief system, like really just look at it and just tell myself, you know what? I'm just going to believe what gives me comfort right now in this moment, regardless of what anybody says, because nobody can see what's happening in your brain. Nobody can see your thoughts. And so if I wanted to completely just get lost in the belief that he was still here, my dad, energetically, I was going to own that and allow that to help me process the not having him here physically. And that is also what the book explores as well. What is energy? And that's why I went into these, they seemed strange, tangents about the Manhattan Project and what is a ghost and what is energy? What is a manifestation of a ghost? I also talked about, and we'll probably get into it, but like folklore. There's so much various folklore that many of us regionally or latch onto. For example, this book, Vanishing Daughters, deals with the vanishing hitchhiker. And then I just started asking myself, how can so many people
Yeah.
in Chicago, because this covers Archer Avenue in Chicago, which is one of the most haunted roads in the Chicagoland area, if not one of the most haunted roads in the United States. And I just started asking myself, there's so many people over decades, since the 30s, that have claimed to see something there, multiple things. What is it about this road? What is it about these people? Are they all making it up? I doubt they're all people of faith. Maybe some are atheists. Maybe, and that's what I was like, even atheists are seeing stuff. What is going on? And so I started doing a lot of research about consciousness. What is consciousness? What is energy? And I just got lost in that.
Yeah, we can definitely get into it more because I was like always one of my questions is like exploring your research and if you approached it differently and if there was like fascinating, surprising things that you like didn't expect to learn or find out. And that whole the whole fact that like you pointed it out in Briar's story too while she's trying to figure things out is how like you make a good point like generations and generations of people from various regions all saying reporting similar instances and it's what I don't know what's it one or two it's like maybe a coincidence but it's so many it's there's something there and I'm not usually one to like I don't know. I'm not like denying the existence of like ghosts or spirits or lost souls or anything like that. I don't mess with paranormal activity in general. I'm just like I'm not if you guys are here, can you are you cool? I'm cool. We can exist. Whatever. Just don't mess with me. Don't scare me. Don't scare my kids. I'm like just like leave the dog alone. It's like that where I'm like I'm just going to mind my business. But I just think it's so fascinating when there is that like how you describe of the thin place or the energy levels and how there's connections there it's that's and then like the levels of consciousness and it's all it's like how does that all play out I just kind of want to explore yeah like how was your process with that like anything fascinating that you learned stuff like that.
I do have one story for you regarding the paranormal. So we are. I was born in Puerto Rico, so we're Puerto Rican. We're very superstitious, my family. We have a lot of superstitions around death. Like it was a mad panic, and we're Catholic, so it was a mad panic to find a priest to do the final rites. So we had to do the final. So we had all the ritual. There was a lot of stuff. We did all the stuff for my dad. And I remember, and within my family, there's a superstition that they will come and visit you. And there's also more superstitions around it, but I'll focus on this one. But I remember sitting with my dad's body, and then we sit vigil with them for hours, and we have family come and say goodbye before we call the funeral home. And I remember at one point I was sitting with my dad's body, and I looked at my dad's body and I said, "Do not come to me as a ghost, because I'm going to freak out, Dad." And I was crying, like, please, like begging him, "Do not come to me, Dad. Do not. I cannot. I think I would lose my mind, and they would put me in an asylum if you came to me." And after he died, I was getting phone calls from my cousins, and they were like, "Your dad wants me to tell you this," and they were telling me these. I was getting messages from him from all these people, and I finally had a dream with him, and I was so mad. And so he comes to me in a dream, and he's my brother's name is Richard, one of my brothers, and he's Richard is bothering me, and I was like, "What?" Richard is bothering me. And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And he shouted, "Richard is bothering me." And I woke up screaming. It was like 4 a.m. And I called my mom and I was like, "Mom, Dad told me Richard is bothering him." And she's, "Oh, I didn't want to tell you. Your brother has been going to his gravesite every day and will just sit there from morning until they close the gates. I've been
Oh.
telling him it's not healthy for him." And she's, "I'm gonna wait till he wakes up and I'll call him and tell him." And my mom's, "There was no way you would have known that because you were just at."
Yeah.
And so that's my dad coming.
Oh my god. No
After that,
wonder you became so fascinated, like, and wanted to dig deeper in this. That is so wild. It was like, still scary, but maybe comforting? You're like but I love that's how your dad chose to send that message. "Richard is bothering me."
bothering me. And I was like, "What?" I'm like, and I was like, "Thank you. Please don't come back." I've seen him again in dreams. He'll come to me in dreams and he'll tell me things. And so it's been interesting. I think I had a dream with him a few weeks back. He came to me. He was very young and handsome. He must have been in his 30s. He was in a black suit, and we were in a white room. And I remember we had this long conversation. And then he like slaps his knees, very Midwestern. He's like, "All right, I gotta go." And he stood up to leave. And then I walked out the room, and the white door closed behind me. And I remember telling myself, "Don't forget what he told you. Don't forget what he told you." And I forgot that
Oh,
completely.
no.
So I used to be a skeptic.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult for me to say that I don't believe, because I've had those profound experiences with him.
Oh, that is so crazy, and man, that is so thought provoking. And I guess I could see that like you teetering on the edge of like unease and whoa, like kind of fascination. Cause I imagine it was definitely a way for you to be like, okay, maybe it's not all bullshit. Like maybe it's not.
It's interesting. It's interesting, the stories that have come to me from my cousins, what they have said that he has said. There's no way they would have known that. I'm not particularly close with them, but
Yeah.
I had one cousin just text me one day out of the blue, and she was just like, "Your dad says you need to get it together, that you're grieving too much and he's worried about you." And I was like, "How the hell?" And she had said something else, and I was like, "There's no way she would have known this information."
Yeah. Especially
It's
if you're not particularly close with that person and she's just like it would be one thing if, she was one of your closest cousins and she could pick up on things with
not even close. And
that's wild.
I just remember running to my husband like, "Look at this text." And he's, "Yep, that's your dad." And it's
Yeah.
just the way it was said. And so I I don't know how to explain it, but I am leaning into it and accepting these
Yeah.
things that have happened. And I think that's what I wanted to share in the book, that maybe things continue on somehow. We don't know
Yeah.
at all. There's so much we don't know, but yeah.
See, so luckily, I'm very fortunate that I haven't, aside from like my niece, I haven't had anybody super close to me pass away like that in that close relationship, except, but the only things I can think of that remind me of the dream scenario is I've had pets visit me in my sleep. And like previous pets after they die, like I've had one pet, she came back to me like years later, but as in like human form. And I was, like, telling her, like, "I'm sorry," like, because I was a away at college when she passed away, and she was, like, my best friend. I got her when I was 10 years old. I was waiting for her since I was 5. I asked my parents, "Can I have a dog?" They said, "On your 10th birthday when you turn 10." So soon enough, when I was 10 years old, I was like, "Can I okay, I can have a dog now." And so she was like the first family dog that I could remember. And when I was away at school when she passed away, and so when she approached me, I was like, "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you when you died." And she just was brushing me away. She's like, "It's okay." And in human form. And I was like, what the I woke up, oh my god, and then I was, like, really emotional and confused about it, but it was, like, also, like, comforting, and then I had another dog, but it was, like, a couple days after she passed away, and it was, like I don't know, I'll get into these scenarios where I'm, like, sleeping, but I don't know that I'm sleeping, like, I'm in my bed, and I'm, like, sitting up at my bed, and I'm trying to move or trying to call out, but I can't, and nothing's happening, and then so I'm so confused, like, I'll see a spider crawling on the wall, and I'll try to get up and ask my husband to, like, because he's not in bed yet, and I'll try to ask him to kill it for me, but I can't move, like, I can't get up and I can't speak, and I'm like, "What is" but it looks like everything's exactly the same. I'm in my bed, in the position that I was in, wearing the clothes I was in, the pajamas, and I can't it's so strange, and that one time that happened when I was still living with my parents with my dog who had just passed away, I fell asleep. I think I was taking a nap, I fell asleep. It was just me and he was my boyfriend at the time, my husband now. We were in my bed just watching TV, and I fell asleep. I was taking a nap, and I thought I woke up, but I looked, and there was the dog, in between us like any normal day before she died, and I wasn't ready for it. I started freaking out. I was like, "She's not supposed to be here. She's passed on," and I was, like, breathing really hard, and I was, like, scared to touch her, and then I think my husband, like, woke me up because I was, like, kinda, like, I was breathing really hard, like, I was hyperventilating a little bit, and I was like it's things like that when I was going through Briar's story, I was like, "I guess I can see how the brain would process that strangely, because then but that's what that reminded me of, because I'm lucky that I haven't lost anybody super close where they're kind of still trying to communicate, but I do remember it really affected me when it was, like, my pets, like, my previous pets after they had passed on and they encountered me, and I was like, "I don't want them to feel like they can't come to me anymore." I just wasn't ready for it. I was just it was just so wild. It was like, I don't I so that's it's just crazy how it's just stories like for Vanishing Daughters, it was just exploring that and finding some way to make sense and make the connections, and poor Briar, because she's, like, grieving, and then she's also I'm not sleeping, I can't eat, like, she'll appear somewhere, like, she'll have a vision or she'll have whatever her spells, and then all of a sudden she's somewhere where she doesn't remember how she got there, and I just found it so fascinating, some of the moments, like, in her journey where it's just some moments I wanted to be like, "Girl, sleep. Girl, eat. Girl, talk to your boyfriend. Girl." Yeah, yeah.
I love that you mentioned the pet thing because I don't because this sounded out there, but, like, I had a Shih Tzu, a little Shih Tzu poodle, and he died, like, a few months before my dad died. This little cute black Shih Tzu poodle, we had him for I think he was, like, 20 when he died, and one of the weird texts from my one of my cousins who had no idea that I had a little black Shih Tzu poodle, she when she texted me, she's like, "I saw your dad in a dream, and he looked so good, he was in a suit, and he was walking this big Doberman in a park." And I was like, "Oh,
Oh.
that's Lenny." Lenny appeared to him as a big dog because that was like his big, because he was like a little dog, but he had this big dog energy. And I was like,
Oh
pets
my god.
here is what I believe. I don't know. I believe it now. And it
So
was
funny that even the dog, like, and the afterlife, he got to be who he wanted to be. He got to, like, true his true attitude.
yeah. But yeah, yeah, I think it was I really just wanted to explore that time, and then also time. Like, time doesn't feel linearly when
Mm.
you're grieving. You have no clue. I think it probably took me a good year to finally get a grasp on just stuff again. I was just not in a good place. I had to handle all the funeral arrangements and
Mm.
like my mother and brothers were clueless, and so I just had to, and writing, and it was just a lot. And I think I needed to show that. I had to show that in this book that grief is not just emotional, it is physiological, it is horrific. And then
Yeah.
you pair that with a ghost, and then you pair that with a serial killer. Put her under even more stress, so that was great.
Yeah, you gotta find a way to channel it and explore it and make sense of it, but also add that those extra stakes, right? You had to like, okay, this isn't you don't wanna totally bring down the vibe, like, you wanna engage the character. Because yeah, I was, like, rooting for her. I was like, "Girl, bring her home. You gotta stop him." I was
Yeah.
like, "You gotta stop him." Because one thing also I wanted to hop on, because I sense, like, the commentary that you offered also in the book with obviously, there's the parallels with the borrowing from the Sleepy Beauty story, but also how many different versions of that story are and how disturbing it can be because it's also touching on the points of violence against women
Mhm.
and in my hold on, what are my notes here? Oh, like how just society, it's like they become these women become the cold cases they become, and especially with the particular spirit that she's dealing with, it's oh, it just becomes folklore, or she becomes a scary story, or she just becomes but nobody
Right.
does anybody know for sure what happened to her? Because it was never solved. Like we're more fascinated by the serial killers that we want to learn about them. We want to find a motive and the purpose and why and whatever about them, but we're not focusing on the fact that a young woman's life was like taken and she didn't get to have so many experiences and she there was no reason for this to happen other than this like evil force that was hunting her down.
I was completely fascinated with that. Like so many folk stories and urban legends deal with the ghost of a woman or a screeching woman or a woman in white. And so here's this, if you believe in ghosts or you could, or even if you don't, why is it that it's a woman that becomes monstrous? And we never ask, where did this story originate? And this particular story that I am exploring is a specific vanishing hitchhiker in the Chicagoland area that's a woman that has been reportedly seen since the 1930s. And there are several stories around her that she was hit by a car, the victim of a hit and run. And so, why is there this? Although this specific one that I talk about in the book, I feel like Chicagoans talk about her a little bit more endearingly. Like they love her. Like this is our,
Mm,
we love her. But there are other ghost stories of women that are just monstrous and scary. And I just started wondering, were these once upon a time murder victims? And so
yeah.
it's just we're doing something horrible to them twice. They were killed. Perhaps their murder went unsolved, and now we call her a monster, and that's so sad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you touch on that too because it is because the repeated one is just like it's such a sad story because she's God, you tugged at the heartstrings because I don't want to give anything away, but like with the man in the gray car and what happened that night with Mary, and I was just like, oh my God, I couldn't. Once I got to that point of where people's kind of identities are being shown and the connections to Mary and things like that. Because obviously there's strange things, but because there's a man in the gray car that her mom was saying, "No, don't worry about him. Just don't worry about it. It's okay." And she just trusted her mom, and then now she comes to think of it, and she's just, "Wait, like, this is still, like, weird and frightening even though he's not doing anything. He's just coming out and he's an older man." And once we realized who that person was, I was just like I had to put the book down. I was like, that is so fucking sad and tragic. Yeah, and this is the that I because it was sad. It was just like it was like, "Take me home," and that's all she wanted, and it was just so sad to think about it that she was in the book, she was just a spirit who was she was just stuck. She was
You
just
know,
stuck, and there was only unfortunately, it seemed like Briar was the only one who could figure it out and who could help
do you
her.
realize it's based off of a real story?
See, I didn't know,
You
and
know
that's makes it
that?
even so much more messed up and sad and heartbreaking.
This is off of a real story that
Oh my
deals with
god.
this ghost. It is true. I will send you the link stuff. It is true.
Yeah, and I
Fantastic. So, for anybody listening, if you watched the original Unsolved Mysteries way back in the day, one of these episodes covers this and that love story, which is real.
Oh my gosh.
He said people say to his deathbed, he fell in love with her. It's tragic.
That is it's so tragic. It is so sad, and that's, like, just God, how powerful and how strong that, like, love was that he just never it just got the hold on him, and he couldn't get over it, he couldn't let it go, he couldn't oh my god, that was
Yeah.
so heartbroken, and her mom was, like, such a mystery about it too. I wanted more of I know obviously it's her mom it's partially her mom's story, like,
Mhm.
she's the driving force, obviously, to help Briar out, she's the whole reason Briar is, like, going through what she's going through, but I would have loved just a book about oh god, what was her name? Aurora. I would have loved a book just about, like, her antics and her growing up and her, like, kooky little personality and connections like, otherworldly things. I wanted more from her.
Maybe one day I'll write like a little that might be fun to write a
Yeah.
little it's like this woman in the woods with these 2 children and, like,
Yeah.
it is
'Cause
interesting.
yeah, like a short story or something like that, or like a collection. Yeah. There you go. That one's free. A little freebie for you.
And then with the mother, with Briar's mother, I also wanted to cover that whole sometimes families have these secrets and you're just like, what's going on? So many of us have like family secrets that were never like truly divulged, and we just get like the bits and pieces of it. And that's what I wanted to do there. Oh, there's family secrets here. Not necessarily like horrible, but there's just stuff that people don't want to talk about because it's too painful or whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That reminds me of a conversation I was having with another author who she had it's called The Pulitzer Saga, by Linda Ambrose Broneman, and she basically was like she was raised Catholic and stuff, but then when she was 27, she realized one of her I think it was like her grandfather or great uncle had accidentally revealed that they were Jewish. Like
Yeah.
her family's Jewish, like Hungarian Jews. And so some years later, they're like I think her aunt's house burned down, but there was a box of materials and photos and clippings and stuff that were salvaged, and she learned like so much of her family's background from like years of just living like in Europe as Jewish and like through all these different obstacles that they face and leading through the Holocaust and stuff like that. And that's what reminds me of one of the stories that she never learned the truth of it, but I think it was her grandfather or the same somewhere along in that same group. They escaped an event, but they're all sworn to secrecy about it. They won't talk about how they escaped, like how it happened. So it must have been something like truly either shameful that they're not proud of or truly traumatic that they never talk about it ever again. No matter how many like the maybe those memories came to the surface at times or someone had asked about them, "What happened? How'd you escape?" And they just refused to go into detail. They refused to talk about it. And I'm like, that's what that reminds me of. It's You're exactly right. There's some family secrets that people just either they're ashamed of it or it's too traumatic or they just don't want to talk about it for whatever reason. And that's so true. Like how many secrets have gone down with the person because it's so crazy to think about how many what kind of circumstances what kinds of circumstances would cause somebody to be like, "This is not I'm not talking about this."
It's so sad.
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause my mind goes to maybe like unfortunately, maybe they sacrifice some people so that they can survive, and they're just like, "I can't." They
Okay.
still haven't come to terms with understandably, they still haven't come to terms about it or with it, yeah. Let's see. I'm gonna throw this at you. What were the most challenging parts to write? What were the most enjoyable parts to write?
I had a lot of fun writing like the fairy tale parts. That was a lot of fun. The keys and gates and locks and thorns. And I struggled with that was like the first line that came to me when I started writing the book. Keys and gates and locks and thorns. And then that just kept coming up throughout the entire book. And I just kept telling myself I didn't know how to connect it. And then my husband's, it's a fairy tale. So maybe you need to tell her fairy tale. And I was like, oh, I'm going to write an original fairy tale to correspond with this story. So that was a lot of fun. The most difficult was I inserted some pieces in there that were true to my experience with my dad. So there is a scene where Briar follows the hearse or the funeral home outside. They're taking the body on the gurney to the hearse, and she's standing in the street behind the hearse, and that was true. So like after my father died, we did vigil with him, and then I finally said, okay, we're going to call the funeral home. And then when the funeral home came, it's not a it's not a pretty process. And they bring the gurney, they lay it down, and they have a bag. And we had to we had to get my mother out of that part of the house. And one brother was like literally holding her back to not, you don't want to see this. And my other brother and myself, we helped. We were like, no, we're his children. We're doing this. And so we picked him up and
Mm,
put him in the body bag. We zipped him up. And then we followed outside to the hearse and the street. And I just remember standing in the street, watching them put his body into the back of the hearse and closing it and looking up at the house. And my dad was so proud of his house. And I remember telling him, this is the last time you're leaving your home, Dad. Oh, I just remember being like, I did my duty as your daughter. I took you out of your home and we made sure, because his wish was to die in his house. And I remember telling him, I fulfilled your wish. And it, to the,
yeah,
yeah,
that's so powerful. I can't imagine how you kept your shit together, like,
I don't
during
know.
so many of those significant moments, like,
It's hard.
I don't that's so emotional and just,
And
like,
you know,
self-reflective, and it's just, like, the last thing that you could do for him.
yeah, I can't imagine people who have lost. So many of us are going to lose our parents. I've lost all
Mm,
my grandparents, but losing someone so close, anyone that's lost like somebody that's close, a partner, a child, God forbid, I can only
mm.
imagine that grief is deep down within you. And I've heard people say it doesn't get better. And I'm like, it really? I think you just learn to live with it.
Yeah.
And of course, there's other situations. I'm happy. I could say at least it was a natural, not natural, but he died at home. We got to be with him. But like with the story, I just started thinking about murder victims. How traumatic is it then to lose somebody you love that deeply to an event like that?
Yeah.
I was just beside myself thinking about that, thinking about these families that have, and then they have no answers. And so
Yeah.
that's what I hoped that Breyer could at least in this story give those families this fictional tale, because this is based loosely on 51 real unsolved murders throughout the Chicagoland area, in which law enforcement have said there is no serial killer. However, these 51 women were all strangled, and most of them were set on fire, and they were found in garbage cans. So these are very similar
Mhm.
stances, and there have been community meetings and protests, and there's also been the Chicago Police Department have held press conferences saying, "No, we don't believe there's a serial killer." And I'm like, 51 women
Yeah. Over the
in
span of, like, how many years? Like,
20 years, about 20
20
years.
years? Oh, that could easily be the same person. Because 'Cause I'm thinking like, "Oh, is it over 100 years?" And, yeah, I could see of it, but no, like, 20 years, it's I'm on that. I'm hopping on that train. That's definitely gotta be
It's
something.
bizarre. And these are mostly women of color, but it's a range of women, a range
Mm,
of ages. It is scary. And I I write a lot about women that have gone missing, or women that have been murdered, because I just feel like there is an epidemic in this country of missing and murdered women. And so
mm.
what are we doing to protect our women? Like, we should be protecting women. We should be protecting everyone, but it's just so strange to me how there isn't more of an uproar when this many people are found dead, or when X many people are go missing.
Yeah, I think the conversation's definitely there, but I think, unfortunately, it's a lot of commentary. It's just from what I see online, it's like why do people hate women? Like, why? Because
Yeah.
it's just either victim blaming or victim shaming or victim questioning, or is this really true? Like, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, why? I bet if a handful of these things are taken more seriously, and guys like, oh, not all men, and I'm hoping that if you see something going on, you could like use your advantage of getting respect from a person of the same gender. You see they're doing something wrong, speak up, because it's if you're not going to do or say anything, then it's yeah, you're just as bad. It's like you're not helping us. You're not helping. And it's so crazy how like it's easy to deny it when you're not educating yourself and you're not seeing it. But it's just in general, unfortunately, there's a lot of the overall opinion is that violence against women is just not, for some reason, it's not something that people need to take seriously, or they turn it around, they flip the script, and it sucks. It's think of how many, people who are growing up in different cultures and different societies where there's not even an uproar because it's I think of just women rights in various countries and how they're just prone to violence if they're not following their fathers or brothers or husbands' orders, and it's stuff like that where I'm just like, this is so like in 2025, we're still dealing with these things, like the reality of it. And that's yeah, it's I run and walk talking in circles, but like this conversations there, it's just there's so much talk back. There's just so much like doubting and shaming and it's like people are like, how about you don't dress like that? Like, how about you just don't rape? Just don't rape. Why is that?
Exactly. Nobody has any right to touch anybody. Like, I am of the mindset that, like, it's people should be respected. They should feel safe, regardless of the time. Like that they're stepping out of their houses. Like there shouldn't be any situation where we should be okay as a society that somebody did something horrific and monstrous to someone else. Like we should all be worried if there is somebody that has the personality that they can take somebody off the street and do something awful to them. We should all be terrified. We should
Yeah.
all be fearful, not just like women, but men as well. It's the whole, it's just so shocking to me that this happens. And there's so many things that people have gone missing or have been killed doing the simplest things, everyday things, walking from the Target
Yeah.
to their car. Like, nobody should be feared for their lives leaving Costco in this country
Mm,
or anywhere. Like,
no.
bizarre.
It really is. It's yeah, no, 100%. It's this I don't know. We gotta oh, there's so many conversations that need to be happening, or so many awareness, so many like people made aware. Because there's some of the stories that came up in your book. I didn't know about them, and I'm like, I'm from Chicago. I'm from the area. Like I don't. There's a lot that I don't know, but you're right. It adds what you were saying earlier. It's like Chicago is a character, and it adds to the personality of the city, and like how much it's not just the setting. It's like another character, another player in the game, because it did feel like Chicago was alive and definitely part of the story, like an active part of the story, and that the missing women, the crimes that happen, that's like unfortunately all part of that. What kind of the folklore that's part of the city.
Yeah, I usually write with a fairy tale or folklore or a fable in mind, and this one I picked Sleeping Beauty because missing and murdered women because of the vanishing hitchhiker. I just felt like this was the best fairy tale to apply. And there's different versions of Sleeping Beauty, but the specific one that I fell in love with is that people don't realize that in one of the original versions of Sleeping Beauty, it's not the prince's kiss that wakes her up. She saves herself. She just wakes up from the 100-year curse. And I thought that was so sad that this entire time we always thought like a man saved her and its curse just ended. And I wanted to
Non-consensual saving too. It's like
and I wanted to cover that. I wanted to say she saves herself. And
yeah,
I wanted her to save herself and another woman at the end. I wanted women to save women in
yeah.
this story. Yeah.
So important. Yeah, so important. I love that. I love that Just, like, making that happen and including that part and stressing that part of it, because it
Yeah.
is, like, you're adding that story of trying like, women taking the power back,
I didn't
for
want, like,
sure.
a prince to save anybody. Like, we can take care of ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, 100%, and everybody else, and have periods, and deal with bullshit all at the same time, like, we
We're
could do
pretty
all of it.
we're pretty amazing. Yeah.
We are. Okay, Cynthia Pelayo, what are you working on that you could talk about? What's next up for you?
I have so much. I'm working on another fairy tale. It should be out, I think, in next year or so. And I have like tons of short stories and essays coming out. I'm going to be in the End of the World as We Know It. Tales from Stephen King's The Stand. It's an anthology that a ton of authors revisit The Stand, and Stephen King is writing the introduction. So that's really cool. That'll be out this year as well.
That's so fun.
Super cool.
Yeah, that is so cool. I'll have to keep an eye out for that one for sure. So, where can we find you online and on social media?
You can find me at my website, CINA Pelayo, PELAYO.com. I'm on Blue Sky right now and Instagram. There's like a lot of shifts and changes with social media. So just when all else fails, just find me on my website. I will be updating my website in the next this month. I'll have a new website, so that'll be nice.
Perfect. Cynthia Pelayo, Vanishing Daughters. That book is available on March 11th. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks for your time and thanks for just being authentic and generous with your answers and being honest and opening up. And it was so fun to talk to you again. And if and when you're ready to talk about your next work, keep in touch. I would love to chat again.
I'd love to, Megan. It's always a joy.
And there you go. That was Cynthia Pelayo talking about Vanishing Daughters. That book is available on March 11th. Check out the show notes where you can find links to purchase the book and where you can find Cynthia online and on social media. Find Cantina Book Club online and on social media as well. Subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast player so that you don't miss a beat. If you need book recommendations, check out my book reviews on cantinabookclub.com. Whatever genre you're interested in, I've got something for you. And if you can, hop on over to Goodreads and Amazon and give your favorite authors and titles a rating or review. It really does help them out. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.